In the last video, you have seen how easy it is to create objects and put them into your database, but we couldn't really see them in any way or get them from the database. So in this video, we're going to explore how we can achieve that and how we can actually get information out of our database again. And if you remember the presentation about CoreData, then you might also remember the process of creating a fetch request, or what a fetch request really is. And the fetch request really is a way to get information out of your database. And this is actually what happens. So if we have a look at the fetch request, it consists of an entity type. So this is what kind of data do we want to get from our database. Then we can define a so-called predicate, which lets us specify what exactly we'd like to look for. In this case, we're looking for a salary greater than 60,000. And then we also have the possibility to add a sort descriptor that changes the ordering of our data that gets returned to us. And in that case, this is ordered ascending alphabetically. And this fetch request is then sent to the managed object context, which passes it through the persistent store coordinator and so on into the actual database. And the database then returns an array of objects that is sorted the way we wanted it to be, and that also only displays what we actually wanted. In this video, we're going to concentrate on a very simple fetch request, but let's do it nonetheless. So this was the code to create an object, and I'm going to add some comments around this creation code. And at the top, we're going to add the code that we're going to need to get data back. So we are now creating our first fetch request. So this is going to be a notebook request because we are looking for notebook objects. And this is of type NSFetch request. And with angle brackets after the type, we're specifying what kind of objects we'd like to get back. So in our case, we want notebook objects. And then we can initialize our notebook request simply by using the notebook class and accessing the fetch request function that puts a fetch request into our notebook request. And with that, we have already created all we really need. And what we also want to do, and this is in many cases useful to access the return objects as false property and set this to false. And this helps us to directly access all of the properties later, because sometimes CoreData returns you objects as false, which increases speed and also the efficiency of data delivery. But in our case, we want to be sure that we can display all of the properties that we really want, and therefore the objects that we get should not be false. And now what can we do to actually get our data from the database? We have a fetch request, a notebook request, and now we have to assign the results somewhere. So we are creating a notebook array, and we're directly initializing it as an array of notebooks, not notebook requests, but notebooks. So this is an array of notebooks, and then we can use a do try catch statement. And what we want to try is using our managed object context, which we get by using the persistent container and the view context, to fetch objects. And therefore, we pass along the fetch request that we've already created, which is our notebook request. And what we could also do, for example, is at the top, create a managed object context constant and simply use the persistent container and the view context, so that every time we need our managed object context, we can just use MOC, or managed object context. And then we still have to catch our possible errors here by printing the error, and we should also assign our result to the notebook array. So in our do block, we take our notebook array and we try to fetch information and get information, and if this works, we will pass it into our notebook array. And with that, we can actually simply print our notebook array and run our application. And if everything went well, we should see some results in the console. And here we are. We have actually two notebooks, one I already created earlier, and here is my first notebook that we created in the last video. And now let's also see how we can structure this a little bit more. So I'm removing the print statement and we're using a for in loop now. So I'm using a notebook in my notebook array. And for each notebook array, I want to print something. So this is a notebook named, and then we use string interpolation. We use the notebook and its title. And also say, and it was created at, and again, we use the notebook and it's created at property. And this is the way you really access your data. And it's really as simple as using a text field or a label or anything like that. And that's pretty cool. And now I'm running my application again, and we shouldn't get this array output, but a structured, nicely created string that we just designed here. And here we go. This is a notebook named, well, it's an optional, so let's just force unwrap that for a nice look in our console. And here we go. So this is a notebook named a notebook, and it was created at, and so on. And here we have, this is a notebook named my first notebook, and also created at a specific date. So this is how you get information from your database. And in next videos, we're going to explore how we can configure our fetch requests a little more to get exactly what we want from our database.